Hello, I'm Sebastian. Welcome to 9 Trees podcast. Today, I will summarize and review the book. Intellectuals and Society by Thomas Sowell examines how intellectuals influence public policy, cultural fashion, and everyday assumptions, often without bearing direct responsibility for results. Sowell uses the term intellectuals to mean people whose work deals primarily with ideas and who sell their expertise largely to a general audience, rather than practitioners whose credibility is tested by tangible outcomes. The book explores why societies grant such figures outsized authority, how media and academic institutions amplify their status, and what happens when elegant theories collide with complex realities. Rather than treating disagreements as mere partisan disputes, Sowell frames the issue as a recurring social pattern. Incentives reward persuasive narratives, moral posturing, and sweeping visions, while the costs of error are dispersed to others. Through historical examples and institutional analysis, he argues that this dynamic helps explain repeated policy failures, shifting intellectual orthodoxies, and the persistence of ideas that sound humane yet perform poorly in practice. I will give you key takeaways from this book. Firstly, defining intellectuals and the appeal of idea-based authority. A central theme is Sowell's distinction between intellectuals and other kinds of experts. Intellectuals, in his usage, are people whose primary output is words, arguments, and interpretations aimed at a broad audience. Their influence rests less on verifiable performance and more on rhetorical skill, moral signaling, and the prestige granted by elite platforms. The book argues that modern societies often treat this group as a special class of guides, assuming that facility with ideas transfers to competence in solving practical problems. Sowell challenges that assumption by contrasting intellectual commentary with disciplines where feedback is quick and failure is costly. When a bridge collapses or a business goes bankrupt, the record is difficult to hide. When a policy inspired by fashionable theories fails, responsibility is diffused across agencies, time, and voters. This helps explain why intellectuals can maintain authority even after major errors. The topic also addresses why audiences seek intellectual leadership in the first place. Complex societies create uncertainty, and sweeping explanations offer psychological relief. Elegant frameworks promise clarity, direction, and virtue, which can be more emotionally satisfying than incremental, trade-off-heavy problem-solving. Secondly, incentives, accountability, and why bad ideas survive. Sowell emphasizes that the social role of intellectuals is shaped by incentives. In many settings, the reward structure favors originality, boldness, and moral urgency over careful calibration and humility about limits. A striking argument is that intellectuals often face weak accountability for consequences. They may gain status for advocating policies that sound compassionate or enlightened, while the practical burdens fall on administrators, taxpayers, workers, or marginalized communities who experience unintended effects. Because the costs are widely dispersed and delayed, it is hard to connect the original idea to the lived outcome. Meanwhile, the intellectual can move on to the next cause, reinterpret the failure as insufficient commitment, or blame opposing forces. The topic also explores how peer networks and institutional gatekeepers can insulate reputations, making it difficult for counter-evidence to change consensus. In Sowell's view, this environment can reward consistency with prevailing moral fashions rather than accuracy. The result is a mechanism through which ideas that deliver poor results can persist, be repackaged, or return in new language, especially when they flatter the self-image of educated elites or align with media narratives. Thirdly, the vision of society, abstract models versus trade-offs and constraints. Another major topic is the contrast between broad visions of how society works. Sowell is known for highlighting the difference between approaches that start from abstract ideals and those that start from observed constraints. In this book, he applies that lens to intellectual influence. The more an argument is anchored in a tidy model of human behavior, the more attractive it can be to intellectuals and their audiences. Yet real societies include incentives, knowledge limits, cultural variation, and unintended consequences that resist neat solutions. Sowell argues that many intellectual interventions underestimate these constraints, leading to policies that ignore trade-offs. Measures designed to fix one problem can worsen another, but the initial moral framing makes the trade-off politically and emotionally hard to admit. The topic explains how intellectual discourse often treats disagreement as evidence of bad motives, rather than as a clash between competing costs. By focusing on visions, Sowell is not merely debating individual policies, he is analyzing how a certain style of reasoning gains prominence. The broader point is that good intentions do not substitute for institutional realism, and humane aims require mechanisms that actually work under real-world conditions. Fourthly, the role of media, academia, and cultural institutions in amplifying influence. Sowell devotes attention to the institutions that elevate intellectuals and spread their ideas. Universities, major newspapers, magazines, and broadcast media can function as status-conferring systems, turning certain voices into default authorities. The book examines how these institutions select for particular types of messaging, striking claims, coherent narratives, and positions that signal sophistication to an educated audience. This does not require conspiracy. It can emerge naturally from professional incentives, shared social circles, and the economics of attention. Another element is the tendency for peer validation to substitute for external testing. When journalists cite academics, academics cite journalists, and both cite the same celebrated commentators, ideas can circulate in a closed loop that feels like consensus. Sowell also discusses the asymmetry between criticism and correction. A dramatic moral accusation can travel faster than a measured rebuttal, and later evidence may not receive equivalent coverage. Over time, this dynamic can shape what the public believes is responsible or enlightened, even when alternate perspectives exist. The topic highlights how influence is manufactured and maintained through platforms, not only through the intrinsic merit of arguments. Lastly, policy consequences. When intellectual prestige meets governance reality, the book connects the sociology of intellectual life to the practical world of policy. Sowell argues that when influential thinkers promote sweeping reforms, the proposals often collide with administrative complexity and human behavior. The gap between intention and outcome matters because intellectuals can shape public expectations and political agendas, sometimes pushing leaders toward symbolic victories rather than workable designs. This topic focuses on how policies inspired by high-level ideals can overlook implementation details, enforcement realities, and second-order effects. It also addresses how intellectual debates can polarize governance by framing issues as moral absolutes, which discourages compromise and learning from partial failures. Sowell suggests that decision-making improves when more weight is given to institutions that reward feedback, adaptation, and accountability. He contrasts policy formed by those who must deliver results with policy shaped primarily by those who are rewarded for persuasive commentary. The topic encourages readers to evaluate reforms by asking practical questions. What are the incentives created? How will success be measured? Who pays if it fails? By shifting attention from the brilliance of the idea to the structure of consequences, Sowell aims to cultivate skepticism toward prestige and a stronger demand for evidence-based governance. In conclusion, this book fits readers who want to understand why certain social and political ideas become dominant, especially students, journalists, policy-minded professionals, and anyone frustrated by repeated cycles of fashionable solutions that disappoint in practice. It also serves readers who enjoy institutional analysis and who are willing to question the prestige that surrounds public thinkers. The practical benefit is a sharper filter for evaluating claims in the news. Instead of asking only whether a proposal sounds compassionate or sophisticated, the reader is prompted to ask about incentives, feedback, trade-offs, and responsibility for outcomes. That shift can improve civic judgment, voting decisions, and even workplace leadership by encouraging accountability and skepticism toward rhetorical certainty. Compared to similar books that focus mainly on partisan critique, Intellectuals and Society concentrates on recurring patterns that cut across eras and ideologies, emphasizing how institutional rewards shape what gets said and believed. Its value is in connecting culture, media, and policy into a single explanatory framework, helping readers recognize how influence works and why well-meaning ideas can still produce harmful results. For readers seeking clearer thinking about public life, it is a worthwhile purchase. If you would like to support Thomas Sowell, you can buy the book through the Amazon link I've provided in the podcast description. After reading the book, please let me know what you think and share your thoughts. See you around.